Life as Ceremony shares personal stories, interviews with inspirational souls, and practical wisdom to help you reconnect with yourself and spirituality. Welcome back to another episode of Life as Ceremony. Today we have Kaitlin Stephens joining us. She's a therapist, couples counselor, heart-led guide, my retreat co-host, and my good friend. Thank you for being here today, Kaitlin.
Hi, Sam, and hi, everyone listening. What a pleasure to join in on the fun.
Yeah. Are you ready to? I was almost about to launch into rapid fire immediately because I know you're very excited about it.
I'm so excited.
Well, before we do, just to let listeners know what we will be talking about eventually today, we are going to chat about navigating friendships as an adult, setting boundaries with friends, attachment styles, love languages, and friendship as a form of medicine. But before we do, we'll do rapid fire.
Can't wait. Let's go. LFG.
Okay. Dogs or cats?
Dogs.
Dogs. I
100%.
I have to say you are an amazing dog auntie to Chief.
Thank you. I love being Chief's auntie. He is such an angel.
Caitlin literally takes Chief for a walk, like together, the two of them. She'll be like, "Can I take Chief for a walk?" I'm like, "Wow, you were the dog auntie." He loves you. He really does.
Oh, I love him. He's so
Yeah,
sweet. And dogs are just so special in so many ways.
truly. Yeah. Words of affirmation or acts of service?
It's so interesting because I think as I get older, my love languages are changing. So I kind of want to say both,
You can say
but
both.
I would lean like with intentional words of affirmation, they really land. So
Hmm.
maybe that's it.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Intentional, like when a friend or just someone like really sees you and hears you.
Exactly. And they like notice things or they point something out and you just kind of really feel seen, heard, and understood.
Hmm. Friends who challenge you or friends who comfort you?
Again, I think I like the combo,
Yeah.
right? Because you're great at that. You have such a loving comfort, but then also a challenge in the way of making sure I'm kind of on path and not in like a forceful way, but you do ask really beautiful questions that have really, really challenged some of my beliefs, which I think is so important as friends. Like we can have so much love when we are having honest conversations. So I think that combination is what I truly love.
Aw, thanks for sharing that, Kate. That
Yeah,
was
no problems.
so sweet. Quality friendships or a wide social circle?
Yeah, that's another one that's changed as I get older. My whole thing was the more the merrier. And I still think we should, obviously include and not exclude. And what I'm realizing as I get older is not everyone wants to be in big groups, and including Sam. Um, so not just Sam, but in general. And also, sometimes it does change the dynamic, right? When you don't feel maybe as at ease with certain people, and then that kind of changes the whole group. And yeah, I think there's something to be said now about quality over quantity. And also I find as I get older, I really want to honor those kind of closer friends in my life, and not kind of spread myself too thin trying to do it with everyone and anyone.
Hmm. Absolutely. And the way you talk about quality over quantity, what I always say, low maintenance, high quality.
I
The
know, I
only
love
types of
that.
friends we're accepting in our 30s. Low maintenance, high quality.
Yes.
Um, Talking to a friend or journaling your thoughts.
Talking to a friend for sure. I
You
love
know,
blah, 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 blah.
when I wrote this question, I was like, if she says journaling your thoughts, I think I might show her my call history. No, I'm
Or my
kidding.
voice notes.
It's okay. I do the same to you. Favorite type of tree?
I would say I love palm trees. I love all the varieties. I love the palms in the wind. I think it's very meditative. It also reminds me of such warmth and sunshine, which I love. I'm trying to think. The other one I would say is arbutus because I love the color of the bark, and I love how they also make different shapes. Like they're not your classic tree, and where they grow on cliffs and stuff. I think it's really beautiful.
Cool. Thanks for
Yeah.
sharing that with us. And the last one is, do you have a favorite quote, words to live by, or even just something that is relevant or top of mind these days?
I would say Pema Chodron has been like a really impactful person in my life, in my journey. And I don't know if I have it exactly in the words that she says it, but it is, you are the sky and everything else is the weather,
Mm.
which I think is something that I really return back to. It doesn't really matter sometimes what's going around me. It's more of like, how do you have that safe place to land with yourself? How do you have kind of that anchor with who you are, independent of what's kind of happening around you all the time?
Hmm.
But don't get
Just
me wrong, like things impact me, but it's a great reminder of that kind of way of living.
absolutely, just hearing you say it out loud, it felt really grounding to hear. Yeah.
Beautiful.
So what led you to becoming, you're a therapist, you also work with couples, and you also specialize in relationships, not only with couples, but even people's relationships with themselves, right?
Hmm.
What brought you to where you are doing what you're doing?
Yeah, such a great question, Sam. I love it. I would say you've probably heard this before too, is pain can lead you to your path. And I feel like I was a very sensitive person growing up. I overthought everything. I analyzed everything. I cared beyond what was normal of what other people thought of me or, looked at me. And it just led me down some really kind of not great behaviors or choices in my life. And then that led me to a beautiful therapist that I met when I think I was almost 18 or 17. And she completely transformed my life and how I was looking at things. And I would say that that kind of led me to awaken to the love that I am and that relationship to self. And I just realized how a lot of our external things that happen can reflect back to us how we're feeling about ourselves. And if we're not coming from this worthy place, it can be tricky. And I always say this to my clients, is this coming from your worth or your wound? So I think, yeah, coming into being a therapist, my big, too big, I think sometimes, is I do want to awaken humanity to the love that they are. And that starts with the relationship to self. And then that can obviously be such an impactful way of moving through the world and spreading that in all the different areas and relationships and community. So that's kind of where I got with that, of having that really, yeah, tricky time in my life to leading me to what I do now.
Amazing. Just listening to that, I was like, if we weren't friends, I'd want you to be my therapist.
Oh my gosh, thank you, Sam.
No, truly. And just the way you talk about, your relationship with yourself and returning to this essence of love. When I think of healing and therapy, and a lot of people come to therapy for healing, and I think that,
Hmm.
being reminded of our essence and the love we hold within ourselves is a component of that healing. And I see individual healing as collective healing. And I was reminded of that when you were sharing of, we want our relationships with each other, with the world to, be different or be harmonious. And it all starts with self, really.
Yeah, it's so true, that harmony with self and the me to we and the impact that has.
Mhm. How do you think attachment styles show up in friendships? And if you don't mind, just for our listeners, if you just want to share briefly what the attachment styles are or what you're referring to.
Yeah, so attachment styles and how I relate, it's not maybe exactly the terminology that they use in certain books, but I would go off anxious and avoidant and secure. And the interesting thing before we even get into that anxious attachment, especially with my clients, it's really looking to at the environment that you're in, the context that you're in. And I don't think we give that enough credit sometimes, or it's like, oh, I'm anxious and I need to figure this out all on my own and it's all me and I have to do this. And it's like, well, if you're dealing with a friend who's hot and cold, or if you're dealing with a family member who is all over the map, or even a romantic partnership where you feel not safe, seen, or heard, that's going to totally impact your attachment style. So I always want to make that clear around attachment styles, because I think we miss that key point sometimes when we go right into it's all about me, I need to fix me, I'm the problem,
Mhm.
right? So that's like the little piece to that. And it's really helpful to notice what part comes online. So, an example is if you are kind of the anxious type in friendship, you might tend to really overplan. You might tend to, already book in before you're even finished seeing that friend. And it can be really important to notice once we get more in that secure place, it's not going to feel, again, that idea of, is this coming from my worth or wound? And that's going to kind of transform even who we want to spend our time with, where it's not like, if I don't spend time with these people, then I'm not enough, right? It's like, I am enough and I'm going to choose based on that if this friendship is in alignment with like where I'm at in my life. So that's kind of an example of the anxious. The avoidant is that idea of, if there's any slight challenge in a friendship or in a relationship and you run the other way, and it's kind of like that fight, flight, or freeze response when we relate to our anxious attachment. So if you think about that as like flight, you're like, I don't want to even get close. I'm just gonna, not respond. I'm not gonna engage, right? And there's something to be said about looking at challenges in friendships as a way to build a deeper connection. But
Mhm.
again, naming that for yourself can be helpful of like, oh, whoa, like my avoidant part just came online and I don't even want to deal with this. Or, whoa, my anxious part just came online and I am over analyzing, overthinking, thinking I'm done something wrong. And once we get to more of that secure place, which obviously starts with the relationship to self, where we're feeling like, okay, like anchored, grounded, okay, it's so impactful of how you move through all your different relationships and what you decide to do or don't do, rather that being based on, oh no, like I have to do this or else.
Mhm. Yeah. I appreciate so much what you highlighted at the beginning of, for people to not internalize it as their fault, as if they're broken and something needs to be fixed, or as if having an avoidant or anxious attachment style, like it doesn't mean that something's wrong with you. If you're a human being, view it as a pie chart. We all have certain percentages of every attachment style. And really, you're not broken and nothing is wrong with you. And, sometimes in therapy, when we notice those parts coming online in certain relationships where it doesn't feel super helpful, that might be when we want to work on it. And I really appreciate the examples you named of like when it shows up. There were some I could relate to. I felt very called out when you were talking about avoidant. Um, just kidding. And whether we, felt called out in a good way of relating to it, also just noticing, what came to mind for me as well is in friendships or relationships, acknowledging when being met with other attachment styles. And again, just part of the human experience and just something to notice. So thanks.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. What are healthy ways to set boundaries with friends without damaging relationships?
Yeah, this is also, I don't know if you've noticed this, Sam, but I find uh, boundaries have been kind of so loosey goosey on one side, and now they've swung so far the other side where it's kind of like very like cutthroat, or you're out of here. And it's funny, Sam's smiling right now because I have this kind of part of me that's cutthroat Kate when I get like feisty and I have to, yeah. Anyways, so um,
But
and
we love her too. We love
yeah, we
all
love
parts.
her. We just gotta like talk to her and see what's going on. Um, So I would say, this idea of healthy boundaries with friends, it's it's also that exploration within self of like, how do you feel about saying no, right? What is your relationship to your time and how you honor your time? And also this idea of, sometimes you are going to be in certain situations that you might want to set a boundary with a certain person. And I would get curious too around your capacity. Like, what's your bandwidth like? Are you feeling completely depleted because of other areas of your life? And now you're feeling like this is kind of the option. And then if it's gone to the point like where it's not a friendship that is in alignment and it's maybe gone through a season and maybe it's coming to an expiry date, that's okay to honor too. And sometimes it doesn't have to be said. Sometimes it just happens naturally, energetically. And I always say this too, like if you are finding it maybe a little tricky to connect to a friend in your life and you keep on doing it, you're also doing them a disservice because they're not using that maybe energy for a different friend that actually really, connects and they have lots in common. So I think boundaries is an interesting one and just exploring that on an internal but also external and seeing kind of those themes around the power of no or what's important to you around, who you hang out with right now. Like that all has influence with where you're at and what your boundaries look like.
Do you have any examples that you'd feel comfortable sharing of maybe a time in your life when you've had to set a boundary with someone or what that kind of looked like?
Yeah, I would say when a common one with certain friendships that I've experienced is talking about certain people or things. And I I want to make this clear. I think we also have been pretty like hardcore of like, you have to take on my beliefs or else. It's like, no, no, I'm not saying that. It's more about maybe talking poorly about someone that like I'm really close with, or maybe talking about someone else's business that isn't really ours to talk about. So when that happens in my case, I usually, validate what that person is saying. And like, I understand your frustration. That must be really hard. And then it's that idea of kind of redirecting of like, hey, like, are you cool? Like, I don't really want to, be on this topic. Like, are you okay if we talk about this? And that's usually has worked very well. And sometimes, I've had a situation where there was a lot of pushback, but it's just, again, I think we don't remember this when we're doing it. Sometimes it takes like a handful of times
Mhm.
to set boundaries with someone who's not used to us setting boundaries either.
Totally. I think that, a common, myth about boundary setting is we say it one time, and if someone didn't listen, sometimes people will think that they did it wrong. And I'm like, no, you're actually like doing it right. And I know this part sucks, but you might just have to repeat it a few times, or we need to choose differently. But yeah, and
Yeah.
you touch on something important too. When setting boundaries with someone who isn't familiar with that, they might respond with pushback or defensiveness, or it feels unfamiliar for them, right?
Yeah, exactly. And also too, like I think this idea of boundary with self,
Mm.
relationship to self. So if we're noticing the people in our lives aren't respecting our boundaries, I always think it's a good turnaround. Like I always like point your finger out there, but then point it back to you of like, oh, like where in your life are you not honoring your boundaries? For example, like your boundary might be, I'm not going to be on my phone after 9:30 at night. And then you constantly get on your phone, or boundaries around your morning routine, or boundaries around where your energy is being spent. So I think that's also something that we want to look at as well
Mhm.
when exploring the boundary piece.
Yeah. Earlier, you said two things that really stood out to me that I really want to talk to you about. Seasons of friendship, like when a certain friendship goes through seasons. I want to hear more from you about that. And also you talked about expiry dates, which I want to get into maybe after and talk about the rules of ghosting and
Yeah.
natural exits. But tell us more about what you mean when you say friendships go through seasons.
Yeah. It's kind of like the seasons of the year, and how some seasons we might feel really connected to, and other seasons not so much. And it doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with the season. It just is what it is in that moment. And I think this is helpful for relationships, because instead of saying that, oh, this friendship's done, I'm cutting it off, it's more of just honoring that this relationship is in a different season. And sometimes that season might stay a long time. Sometimes that season might be a short season. Sometimes that season might like naturally move into a different type of season, making you more closer than ever. And that's kind of what I mean about that season, instead of feeling like you have to kind of cut all these things out of your life, versus just honoring the seasons in your life.
Thank you for sharing that. It sounds like pure wisdom. And you mentioned it to me maybe a couple weeks ago. And I don't even know if I've had a chance to tell you yet how much it resonated with me. And it just, it opened my mind and allowed me to look at friendships and just relationships a little bit differently. Kind of like
Mm-hmm.
even when I apply mindfulness or think of other areas of life, not everything is going to be 10 out of 10 all the time. And that also doesn't necessarily mean that anything is wrong. And it's also really natural for relationships to sometimes even experience turbulence.
Oh, yeah.
And it doesn't, and you are exactly right. It doesn't mean that that relationship is done. Maybe
Mm-hmm.
that relationship's going through a season. And then something else just came to mind for me today as you were talking. And I think about within friendships or relationships when people start having kids, because they are in a different season of life and how that
Mm-hmm.
impacts the couple, their relationship. It can impact, other friendships, families. Like it just the season of life they're in is changing for them. And it kind of ripples into other relationships sometimes, and that's okay. And then
Yeah.
just like the seasons, it will change again. And so I think sometimes just like learning to be with it and like allowing it to just be the season rather than making it mean good or bad or done or whatever, right?
Yeah. And that's like, Sam, you can relate to this. I know you love nature just as much as I do, or maybe even more. But it is that the seasons of nature, it's not like we're making it wrong when it's winter, or we might not like it, but making it wrong, or spring and summer or fall, right? It's just allowing it to naturally go where it needs to go.
Beautifully
Yeah.
said.
And I want to say one more thing that I think is important around the seasons, if you don't mind.
Yes.
I think too, with this kind of hustle, go, go, go type of situation that a lot of us are in, I think we forget it. I think I've said this to you a few times, Sam, is, the older you get, the thing is, people say the less you're going to see your friends, right? And I 100% believe, like, the older you get, the more you should see your friends.
Mhm.
And I think with that is, yes, text messages and saying I miss you is great, or having, something on the calendar. But again, being more intentional with getting the time where you're doing things that you both love, where you're giggling and laughing in real time, where you're, playing out in the snow, or you're doing things that are going
Right.
to build the season, or build the relationship. So also checking in on that when you feel like there's the season of maybe it moving into distance. Do a little check-in of like, when was the last time you maybe scheduled like a really fun time, just the two of you? Or when was it that you caught up over, some coffee and just like blabbed away about, silly things? So I think we sometimes miss that piece lately too.
Yeah, I'm glad you added this because it feels like the nudge we all need to put that extra effort into our adult friendships. And I didn't mean to laugh as you were talking, but when you talked about like getting together and playing as adults in the snow, I like a couple weeks ago took a video of you and Chief prancing in the snow, and it's like literally the funniest thing ever.
So
Uh,
funny.
so it just reminded me of that. But I love the gentle and like direct challenge. I think it's really,
Hmm.
really important too. Yeah.
Yeah.
And expiry dates. And
Yeah.
what are the rules around ghosting. And you and I used this word the other week, and it's a natural exit. So I want to hear your perspective. Expiry dates, and expiry dates, now that I'm talking, might be different than like ghosting or
Hmm.
a natural exit. But I want to hear your perspective on those things.
Yeah, ghosting is it's an interesting one because if you kind of reflect on it on a personal level when you are ghosted or you ghost someone, it's not the best feeling in the world, that's for sure. And sometimes words aren't necessary, right? And I think sometimes we have to check ourselves on that of what is my intention or agenda of maybe sending this message or not sending this message. And maybe something doesn't need to be said because that's just where kind of you're at. And if you were to say something, maybe the intention is of getting a certain response or wanting a certain conversation to happen. I do hope like all of us start to notice when we do want to kind of ghost or not talk and maybe be open to having a conversation with that person. And it's so tricky. I don't think there is like this way or that way. I think it's such a personal experience of where you're at in relation to that person, where they're at. A lot of influences that could impact that kind of choice.
Hmm. Hmm. Yes, I love the balance in the sense of, you know, ghosting doesn't feel good. To be clear for listeners, we're not saying that that's right or okay, but I appreciate this balance that you're offering of like sometimes things don't require words. And I think that, and correct me if I'm wrong, Caitlin, but like what we mean by that is like if you have an established relationship or friendship with someone, and then all of a sudden all communication is cut off or people are blocked or things like that is not okay. And we're not validating that kind of
No.
behavior at all. And I see Caitlin's eyes like wide going like, no, not at all. But I think that sometimes in like newer friendships and like what I guess I want to hear more from you about this idea of like sometimes we don't need words and like checking yourself and this idea of a natural exit. Like something that's coming to mind for me right now is often like when you what you're feeling, the other person is feeling it too. And what I mean by that is like if energy's not jiving and you're picking up on that, the other person knows that too. And yeah, I guess I'm curious, like, where is this line? What warrants a discussion or what doesn't? Because you're right, sometimes not everything requires words or a conversation. And I guess how do we check ourselves and lean into a natural exit if that's what we might be experiencing?
Yeah, and I think there's a few pieces here. Number one is how important that relationship is to you in your life and maybe where it is in reality. And even from personal experience, I know like you can have multiple conversations and try and talk it out and and then sometimes it just naturally starts, you're not responding as much or you're just noticing your energies other places, and it is such a it's such a hard line of like what to do or not to do. And I always encourage people, if they are having a hard time with that and maybe they didn't get the closure they wanted or they're feeling a little disconnected from it, do something energetically if that lands for you. So writing, a goodbye letter and then, burning it or doing something with it, or going down to the water, grabbing a rock and doing a ceremony around saying goodbye, and not in a, harsh way, but more in a loving way of, as this relationship as it was needs to end for something different to come in.
Mhm,
Right. So things like that can be helpful.
mhm. Yeah, and I think the one you're really speaking to, or that comes up for me around that, is that not ghosting or not a natural exit or anything like that, but really that expiry date, like the way you talked about that ceremony or the loving goodbye. I think about a more established relationship that maybe isn't in the next chapter of my life. And
Mm-hmm.
and not that anything is bad or went wrong, but just based on our paths or where we're going, there's this a natural for me, like this completion of like acknowledging that it's complete. And you're right, sometimes it doesn't require words, and we can, with that friend, maybe, still love each other and still want each other, like nothing but love and success, and maybe still stay connected through social media, but it's just not that, again, that energy is not jiving to hang out the way we maybe once used to, and
Yeah.
not making it mean good, bad, right or wrong. And that's okay, because again, some things expire and that's okay, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And we talk about this, Sam, lots around this idea of who's kind of sitting at your table and how many seats. And I found this so helpful when, I noticed certain women in my life that I thought were like really fun. And I was like, oh my gosh, like I'd love to be closer with them. I'd love to be friends with them. And, we would hang out, but not maybe as much. And then it slowly would fizzle. And it was such a great reminder of like, oh, that's because that person has a pretty full table right now with her core people. And that doesn't mean that there's anything wrong or, you're not enough. It just is where that person's at. And there's only so much energy that they have for those people sitting around their table.
Hmm. Yeah, I think that's a great way to put it. And I'm loving these metaphors. I think, yeah, I think metaphors help with the emotional component of it feels like less charged when I look at it that way. I'm like, oh, that makes
Hmm.
logical sense. And then, yeah. How can we deal with friendships that feel unbalanced? So when one person is giving more, or maybe one person is making all the plans or always reaching out. Yeah.
Yeah. This is a this is an interesting one because it's again that choice. If you are noticing you're the one who takes the lead, who plans, who does all kind of the organizing, and that's okay for you to do, and that doesn't bother you, but noticing that maybe the person on the other side is not a planner, who just kind of says yes to whoever invites them, and that's kind of their energy, that's their go-to. I think there's something to be said about, yeah, just honoring that of like, okay, this is where we're at. And if you are noticing resentment or your capacity is not there, what a beautiful opportunity to, say what's there of like, hey, like I'm just feeling like lately I'm reaching out a bit more, or I'm doing the planning and I'm just checking in on what's on your side. If you're, if you have lots going on, right? It can be a very curious, open conversation versus accusing the other. But again, I think that's the tricky piece is like sometimes you will be the person that plans and takes the lead, and sometimes you won't. And then you might not see that person. And are you okay with that? And it's sometimes nothing to do with you at all. It's just how they operate, how they move through the world. But again, that's kind of your decision in that moment.
Hmm. Totally. Very well said. I think that, um, just honoring your role in certain friendship groups is important, right? Just hearing you talk, I'm, relating to it. And I think in certain groups or with certain friends, I'm the planner, and then with others, I'm not at all. And so
Hmm.
I think it's also different with certain friends or within certain groups where I take on this role with one person or one group, but with another group, not at all. And so I also think, yeah, that it's different friend to friend as well.
Yeah. And even on a personal note, I remember because I love bringing people together. Like it's so fun for me, and yeah, I just enjoy it so much, Sam,
I know I have a little
and
story after.
yeah,
Sorry.
and after my grandfather passed away, I was just really kind of, I don't know, reevaluating things, noticing like where I want to spend my time and energy. And I just did a thing where I'm like, I'm not going to reach out to anyone and see who reaches out to me, like kind of obviously a little bratty. But and it was interesting because it did bring some light to, certain friendships, surprising that they were like so concerned, and then other ones that I was a little disappointed in. But again, you never know what people are going through. And I think we always have to keep that in mind. I think we sometimes personalize everything. But
Mhm.
if that person is going through it with their career, with their personal life, with their family, do you think they're going to have the capacity or energy to kind of make the plans or call you? And I always love this idea too. Like if you're thinking about a friend, text them, right? If you're thinking about a friend, send them a cute voice note or like a photo. Uh, don't wait. Like just do those little like nudges where you get them. It's like, okay, I'm thinking about this person. And usually what happens, I don't know if this happens to you, Sam, but when I do that, they're like, oh my gosh, I was just thinking about you. And then it turns into this really beautiful conversation, maybe even picking up the phone and having a good catch up.
Absolutely. I completely agree, and I love the reframe around rather than making it mean something negative or anything like that, using it as an opportunity to say hi or send a voice note
Hmm.
or a picture. Yeah, and I also just like had my hand on my heart for you when you were sharing about your grandpa, but then also this, I'm not going to reach out to anyone and see who reaches out to
Oh,
me.
yeah, right. So, just to normalize that feeling that sometimes it does feel a lot where you want more support or you're not feeling, yeah, that mutual energy or that mutual exchange. And also, that was kind of my young part coming online of like, I'll show them. If my wise adult self came online, she might say to a friend, being like, hey, I'm having a really hard time with my grandfather passing, and it brought up a lot. I saw a lot. Are
Mhm,
you okay?
mhm.
Going for coffee,
Yeah.
right? So there's obviously that aspect.
You're so humble and wise in your acknowledgement of all these parts. And I appreciate it so much because I think, shame being an emotion we all experience as humans, it can be really challenging to be like, hey, that's my younger part coming online. Hey, that's why I said what I said or behaved the way I did. We can have a lot of shame and even in naming that. And I love how you do it in such a humble, grounded way to show all of us that it's very human and I love that you and I like smile about it and like loving all these parts of Kate, like cutthroat Kate or younger Kate. And I'm just really grateful for your openness and your vulnerability and like sharing that with listeners.
Yeah. And even we can relate to that, Sam, about anxious little Kate, right? And I remember Sam when, yeah, I've been with a couple of men that have caused a lot of anxious
Oh, I love her. Remember when I
aspects.
told you to bring her on
Yeah.
a date?
Yeah. So Sam had a beautiful idea about this anxious part. She's like, bring her along and then get her to do maybe some bracelets. We love her, right? And it is about this wholeness as humans, which I think we're trying to maybe only like a specific aspect of ourselves, but no, it's like all of that combined is so gorgeous, so magical, so refreshing and connecting on so many levels.
Mhm, mhm.
Mhm.
I want to chat with you about love languages. I think a lot of people think about relationships when they think about love languages. And I love chatting with friends about love languages and the importance of knowing your friend's love language. So, actually, first, if you could share with listeners, what is your love language or your top two?
I would say I would say physical touch, which is so weird because I grew up in a family who does not hug, who does not like do all the gushy stuff. So, and actually it's really funny because my first year university, I met these really incredible three humans and they called me Stevo because my last name's Stephens. And they were so shook by how I hugged. They would be like, Stevo, what's up with your hug? So it's funny how now, as I am in, yeah, my late 30s, how I love it. I love physical touch. I love giving good hugs. Um, yeah, it's interesting how it changes. And what other ones right now that come to mind? I would say, I think also quality time for me right now is just so important for the people that I love in my life. And I always want to make sure that I'm getting that quality time with them and honoring them that in that way. Um, I also love a good gift, but not just a gift to give a gift, like a really, an intentional gift. It can be something really silly or just small or thoughtful or yeah, I just find those little moments to be really special.
Your three special friends, did they teach you how to give a good hug? Because you give
Yeah, they
great
did.
hugs. Okay.
And every year they're like, wow, this hug is getting so much better. So yeah, it's so funny that that was the theme of my first year university.
Oh, I love that. Learning something new about you every day. I love it. I'll share a quick story about physical touch because I know physical touch is one of your love languages. And I'm all for a good hug, but it's not necessarily like my top two. And I think part of knowing our friends' love languages is to like remember that and show them that. And so Caitlin and I had a sleepover the other day, and and I always was like consciously like, oh, like hug before bed and like a good morning hug in the kitchen. And I really loved it, by the way. But yeah, I think it's just important to keep your friends' love languages in mind. And Kate did this for me too when we had a sleepover because she knows one of my love languages is acts of service. So when I woke up and gave her a hug in the kitchen, she actually already unloaded the dishwasher, which I still talk about because it totally made my day. You know, she walks my dog and unloads my dishwasher. I don't even need a husband.
Sorry, Carson. Yeah, and it is because you and gifts, right? Like it's so funny how I do love, giving a gift because I love receiving gifts. And I think this is something that we want to keep in mind with love languages as we mature, is even when it comes to our partners, our romantic partners, or friends too, where they might really like words of affirmation for themselves. And then you notice them, saying really nice things to you, texting you, writing you things, and you're like, okay, that's them showing how much they love you. It's just not the same. It's not landing the same as it would if it was my love language.
Absolutely. And what
Yeah.
Kate meant about gifts is she always tries to give me gifts. And gifts are my last love language. Yeah, they're my last love language. Like, unload my dishwasher and spend quality time with me. Like, acts of service and quality time. But yes, you do give very sweet and intentional gifts, and I'm very, very grateful. But yes, back to what you were saying of just again the importance of knowing someone else's love language, right? The example
Yeah.
you used of words of affirmation, like just because it's your love language, it doesn't mean that it's someone else's. I actually always come back to this phrase. I think a lot of us, or I'll speak for myself or my generation, a lot of us grew up with um, treat others the way you want to be treated. And then in my 20s, I heard a really powerful reframe, which was treat others the way they want to be treated. And even applying that
Yes.
to love languages,
Yeah.
treat others how they want to be treated. What is their love language? And
I love that.
yeah, and just I want to give listeners a little invitation. Text your friend right now, unless you're
Do it.
unless you're driving, and ask them what their love languages are. I think it's really fun. Yeah.
Yeah, and there's a test you can do. You can make it a fun thing, or even I don't know, having a fun like night together where you're, doing this and figuring out what each other's love language is. It can be, yeah, such a connecting activity and piece.
Okay, I just thought of an idea, Kate. We should do a podcast episode where we have dinner together because Kate and I do a lot of like intentional dinners. Where we did, for example, for the new year, where we reflected on our year before and our year ahead. And I think that'd be really fun if we recorded it and it would give people an idea of, questions to ask each other over an intentional dinner that has
Oh
like
my
a,
gosh, I'm so down.
yeah.
But
Okay.
only if Chief comes.
Yeah, absolutely. Aw, unless you, like, set a boundary with me about because I'm too obsessed with my dog.
If you want Sam to ghost you, don't like her dog.
Yeah, don't talk shit about sheep, otherwise she gon'. Aw. Um,
Oh.
okay, have your professional insights as a therapist changed the way you navigate friendships?
Yeah, 100%. I think
How
it's I think it shows me more and more and more of what's behind the curtain, right? What's actually going on. I always say the channel is right and the volume might be too high. And what I mean by that is you don't know the history, you don't know the trauma, you don't know what's on that person's plate. You don't know what you don't know. Like there's so many things that can influence how one relates. And then also the relationship to self. Like, man, it makes my, it like breaks my heart just to know how many people, and I can relate to that too, is when we really don't feel like we're enough and we really don't feel like we're lovable,
Mhm,
or we're constantly like critiquing ourselves or feeling like we're not good at this, that, and the other thing. And yeah, to have that volume so loud all the time, you can see how impossible it is to be present, how hard it is to show up in the way that you know you want to show up, but you're just going through all the other chatter and the noise, which it just completely takes over. So I think that's really showing me more and more how much influence it has.
mhm. Yeah, what I'm hearing in that is your path, becoming a therapist has that compassion and patience and awareness has translated into your friendships and
Hmm.
relationships. Yeah,
Yeah, 100%.
beautiful.
Hmm.
What's been one of the best things you've learned about yourself through our friendship?
Well, it's so beautiful because from a young age, I've always, I don't know, I've always believed in the magic of life and this idea of anything and everything's possible, and let your heart's desires and dreams take the lead. And for a while there, I've gone through different phases with it, but I think before meeting you, that was kind of feeling a little shaky, and not as strong. And I think, becoming friends with you has been such a beautiful reminder of the magic, the dreaming, the aligned action, the even, not settling for things that are just not in alignment with what you truly desire, right? And I think that's been such a huge thing. And also like you've taught me that, oh, like I don't always have to be the one who is like planning dates. Or even I remember like the sweetest thing you did was I was going away for a month and you made a comment. You're like, okay, we have to make sure we get some quality time in before you leave. Like, let me take you like on this date, or let's do this. And that was so thoughtful. And I think you've just reminded me of what a potent, magical, playful, fun, impactful friendship can feel like. And it's so, yeah, energizing. It's so expansive, and it's such a beautiful, yeah, dynamic that we have. And I would say, yeah, that main thing too is like really allowing that magic and dream to come through again.
Cry on every episode of a life ceremony. Thanks for
I
sharing.
wish I could give you a Kleenex.
I wish I could give you a hug right now. I need a Steve-O hug. I need a hug from Steve-O. No, thanks for sharing that, Kate. And back at ya, like the potency you're talking about and the fun and the play and the magic, like if I were to answer this question of one of the greatest things I've learned about myself through our friendship, it's, how fun and playful life can be and how that can exist in friendships too. I've shared this with you before. I feel like every time we're together, even if we're not actually having a sleepover, and we do have lots of sleepovers. It's partially because I live in a different town, city now, but, but even if we did live in the same
We love
city,
summer parties. It's great.
yeah, I think we'd still have sleepovers, but even if it's not a sleepover, I feel like a 12-year-old girl, like who's about to have a sleepover every time we hang out together. And I think yeah, it's taught me a lot in a short period of time too, for like we're newer friends, but it also feels like we've been, friends forever. And I think of you, I'm like,
Soulmates.
yeah, soulmates, soul sisters, the one of like a friend who I've needed my whole life. And for whatever reason, creator decided to surprise me in my 30s, but whatever. No.
It'll do.
Yeah, no, I
Oh,
love
thanks, Sam.
the
I feel
play.
I feel the same. The play, the
Yeah.
fun, the giggles, the ridiculousness of it. Sometimes we're like, yeah, out at like a spot and all of a sudden we're bursting and people are like, okay, are you good? Are you well?
I know.
Like, just
I know, literally. And yes, exactly. And I
I
feel
know.
so like safe to be weird with you. I
Yeah.
think that's another thing that I've learned through our friendship. And I just think I hope everyone finds friends who they feel so safe to be who they truly are with, but like someone who makes you feel so safe to be weird and to be, that ridiculous wherever you might be, even if it's in the middle of a coffee shop. Um,
Yeah. Love it.
you know what you're reminding me of right now, which leads me to my next question actually, is about friendship as a form of medicine.
Oh, yes.
Tell me more about what that means to you.
Friendship as medicine. It it has in my life some of the most challenging, difficult, dark times. I could have not gotten through it without my friends, without my family. I think there is such beauty in that connection where it literally can, even if it's just a slight kind of lightness that that person can do for you, or even that connection, it is so healing. And that's why I'm so passionate about relationship to self mainly, and then relationship to others, because it is, we are meant to be in relation. We are meant to be in community. We are meant to be witnessed by others. Right. And when we are in those dark times, having that friend who calls you, checking in on you, has more of an impact than they know.
Mhm,
Right.
mhm,
And you can, do all the things, the eating healthy, that obviously is helpful, movement, sleep. And if you feel like you don't have kind of that relation with someone or a group of people, it can be really challenging to, yeah, kind of enjoy this ride sometimes.
mhm, mhm. Yeah, totally. And uh, can I answer this question too?
Yeah, please do. I would love to hear.
Because I often, when I think of friendship as a form of medicine, and I think of you, and I think of our times like running together in the forest, and just, we are the medicine. Nature is the medicine. You're right. We're meant to exist in relation and in community, and these relationships themselves are medicine. Like it's all medicine, it's all ceremony, it's all sacred, it's all spiritual, including
Hmm.
including your friendships and your relationships. And yeah, and just, knowing that you and I talk about that,
Yeah.
friendship being a form of medicine, I think to bring awareness to that or to name that, it feels even more potent. Like, for example, if me and you are running through the forest, that potency of how supportive all of that is for my physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual well-being is, yeah, the medicine itself is more potent because I know you feel similarly and we'll talk about it out loud together or bring awareness
Hmm.
to that, which for me makes it more powerful, more potent.
Yeah. And it's even if it's not a long run, or even if it's not a long, amount of time that you're with that person,
Hmm.
it's just so beautiful how medicinal it is. Right.
Yeah.
And I remember too, when I was going through my separation five years ago almost. Really, really dark time. Like had a hard time getting to bed, just like not good. And I just remember a handful of friends writing really beautiful messages. And I took all those messages and put them up on my mirror and had them laid out as reminders. And, I don't think we sometimes notice those, you know, words of affirmations that we provide to others, or those really honest, beautiful words that we sometimes hesitate to express to those we love. When we do, the impact it has is so beautiful and so, yeah, medicinal.
Medicinal. Yeah. Thanks for
Yeah.
sharing the personal example as well. And yeah, what you were going through and how your friends showed up for you. And yeah.
Hmm.
Mm. Okay. So you and I are offering a retreat this
Yeah,
fall.
we are.
And at the time of recording this, it's almost sold out,
I know.
which
This
is
is so great.
which is wild. I don't know about you, I'm still like in disbelief and shock and immense gratitude and also
Oh, yeah.
excitement for who is a part of this group.
Oh, I'm so excited.
Like it feels so like I always believe who's meant to be there is going to be there. And I think that, even as people register and we start connecting with them over email or we know who some folks are already, I'm just so excited about the group.
Me too. The group, the surroundings, the energy, the food, all of it.
Yeah. And sorry, I don't know if I said this yet. We have one spot left at the time of
Yeah,
recording.
one spot left.
At the time of recording this. So it'll be shared, very soon in a couple of weeks or so. So yeah, I'm not too sure if that one spot will still be available, but I want to chat about our retreat regardless because I am super excited. And also, if someone is listening to this and 2025 doesn't work out, there will be more. So stay tuned.
Yes.
But Kaitlin, what are you most excited about for our retreat in fall 2025?
I am, I'm just so excited to get that group that has already registered together and start just building this incredible container of humans and gathering them in one of my all-time favorite places, the Yukon and Haines Junction. If you haven't been, it is so gorgeous there. The land, it's like the energy of it, also stars, northern lights, nature, mountains, you name it. So it's going to be such a special experience. So I'm really looking forward to that. And yeah, I'm just most excited of like the people that walk through that door at the beginning and the people that walk at the door at the ending,
Mhm.
and just how transformational and nourishing or whatever it's meant to be for them. Like I am just so excited because from personal like going to retreats, I know that feeling. And yeah, I'm just really looking forward to being witness to that.
Yeah.
And what a blessing too, that like you've kind of said it so nicely, that we have one spot left and it's such
Yeah.
an incredible group of people. And yeah.
Yeah. I actually wanted to ask you, is there anything about your own personal retreat experiences you've been on that you want to share? Or might be, yeah, anything at all, anything that comes to mind?
Yeah, I think retreats are such a beautiful way to disconnect from your routine, shake things up a bit in the sense of the mundane moments, moving it into more of focus on you process. And there's such wisdom that can be held in those spaces. Like for myself, the retreats that I've been on have always brought new friendships or learning new things about myself or new practices that I want to bring. They've also, like, I went to this Costa Rica trip when I was 21 and I went by myself and I was so scared. And it led me to meeting some incredible people and also it inspired more of kind of a spiritual level when it comes to exploring masters in counseling. So you never know what these retreats are going to bring. Like it's so exciting. The mystery of it, I just love it. And if you are being called, even if it's not Sam and my retreat, if it's some other retreat, just tap into that. Be like, okay, like What is about this retreat? How can I make this happen? I'm being called to it. And just going with that as kind of the golden breadcrumbs leading you to it.
Yeah. Yeah. I always think if you're meant to be somewhere, like you will end up there. And I think a lot of people are feeling this nudge
Hmm.
for this like deeper spiritual work, and they're being very called to retreat into ceremony. And I think they're getting that nudge for a reason. And exactly what you said, listen to that nudge. Like you're getting that nudge because you're ready, because your soul is calling you to one of those more potent experiences in person, in community, in nature, wherever it might be, right? Whether it's our retreat or someone else's. I think each I think again, this idea of being called to something and trusting you'll end up where you're meant to end up. I hope people and listeners are really empowered to find that quote unquote right retreat for them. Which one aligns with your truth? Which one is going to help you awaken and expand? Because yeah, like there's such a variety out there for a different reason because we all have,
Hmm.
our own unique essence and imprint and our own truth, and different retreats or ceremonies and experiences are going to be more of like a vibrational match, if that makes sense.
Exactly. And Sam, what about you? I want to hear what you're excited about for this
Oh,
retreat.
I honestly, I think you named it. You named it all. I think that the people, I love how you highlighted the people who walk in and the people who leave, because I do believe these retreats, are really transformational. And you said this as well, which I thought was so beautiful, which was, or whatever the retreat experience is meant to be for people. And I think
Yep.
where you and I align really well for retreats is not like these grandiose promises, right? Of like,
Yeah.
this is going to heal you and
You
change
will
your
be
life.
healed
And
forever.
because we're like, I don't know, like but we also believe it's going to be the medicine that that person needs at that moment in time. And I wholeheartedly believe that. And so it's not as strategic marketing as promising to heal someone's whole life forever and always, but
I
but I
know.
think that's why we are a vibrational match for what
Yep.
what we want to share with the world, and helping people, work on their relationships with self and reconnecting to self. I'm really excited for the food. I love
Yeah.
nourishing food, and I'm really excited about that, and connecting with nature and the land. And I wasn't born and raised in Whitehorse, but you have graciously taken me there and shown me your home and community, and it was extremely special, and I can't wait to be back. Yeah.
Yeah, I know. It's going to be so beautiful.
Yeah. Is there anything else that you want to share with listeners today in general about our retreat? Any final words of wisdom, Kate?
Yeah, I think it's always a beautiful reminder having these conversations, listening to this podcast, to remember that if you are, feeling disconnected from someone in your life or you're craving more connection, reach out to someone. You never know where that can lead. And the second piece is, as we can probably all relate to right now, there's a lot going on in this world we live in. And I think more than ever, we are being called for our light to shine as bright as possible. So I really encourage listeners to do the things that are going to increase your vibration, do the things that are going to increase your light, because that is going to be the most impactful thing that we can do right now. Leading with love, leading with authenticity. That is such a potent, powerful ripple effect. And I just want to hope, yeah, I hope you listening can really honor that within yourself.
Thank you for sharing that with us, Kate. I love your gentle nudges and invitations. I'm like ending this conversation. I feel motivated. I'm like yeah, I'm gonna keep shining, and I'm gonna lead with my heart. And I no, but actually, like all jokes aside, I sincerely feel that way. So thank you. Thanks for reminding us all to turn up the volume and shine brightly.
Yeah, get that sparkle going.
Kate, thank you so much for your time, for your wisdom, for coming on the podcast. I love you so much.
I love you, Sam. Thanks for having me, and we'll talk soon.